All right, today we're talking about Shatterbelts. Sounds intense, right? Well, it is. We're diving into what makes some parts of our world so incredibly volatile, so prone to, well, shattering.
So, take a look at these three places: the Balkans, Korea, and Sudan. What could they possibly have in common? I mean, they're on different continents with wildly different cultures and histories. But believe it or not, they all fall under this one very specific geopolitical label, a label that helps explain why they've been such hotspots for conflict.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to nail down exactly what a Shatterbelt is. Then we'll look at the three big ingredients: the cultural fault lines, the superpower chessboard, and the geography that divides them. And finally, we'll put it all together to see why these places fracture.
All right, first things first, let's get right to it. What in the world is a Shatterbelt? Okay, so here it is. A Shatterbelt is basically a region that's stuck between a rock and a hard place. A really big rock and a really big hard place. It's got all this internal instability, it's always splintering and fracturing, and then, to make things worse, you've got major world powers treating it like their personal playground, competing for influence. So it's being pulled apart from the inside and from the outside.
Okay, so ingredient number one for creating a Shatterbelt, it all starts from within. We're talking about deep, historic, cultural fault lines.
And the textbook example here, of course, is the Balkans. You've probably heard it called the powder keg of Europe, and for good reason. For centuries, it's just been this incredible mix of different groups: Albanians, Greeks, Romanians, Slavs, Hungarians, you name it. And when you have that many distinct cultures packed into one area, it can, and often did, lead to serious clashes over identity, beliefs, and, maybe most importantly, who gets what land.
But hey, these fault lines aren't always about ethnicity. Take Sudan, for example. The core conflict there was ideological. It was a battle over the very identity of the nation. It boiled down to a huge question: should we be a secular state or an Islamic state? And when Sharia law was introduced, it just poured gasoline on the fire, pushing an already tense situation right to the breaking point.
Okay, so you've got your internal divisions simmering away. Now, let's add ingredient number two: massive external pressure. This is where these local conflicts go global, and the region becomes a giant chessboard for superpowers.
And this chart, man, it just lays it all out perfectly. You see this pattern over and over again. A local fight suddenly gets supercharged because the big guys pick sides. Think about it. Korea. The US and its allies back the South. The USSR and China back the North. Same exact playbook in Vietnam. And this isn't just ancient history, right? We see the same dynamics in Ukraine, with Western support on one side and Russian influence on the other. It's a classic Shatterbelt move.
And here's the real kicker. These outside powers, they're not just helping out. They're projecting their own fights onto these smaller conflicts. A dispute over a border or a resource suddenly becomes a battle between communism and democracy. It turns a local fire into a global inferno, and it makes finding a peaceful solution almost impossible. All right, on to our third and final ingredient. And this one might surprise you. It's the land itself. You see, geography isn't just the stage where the drama happens, it's one of the main actors.
Let's circle back to the Balkans. Look at all those mountains. That rugged terrain isn't just pretty to look at, it's a huge part of the story. For centuries, those mountains acted like giant walls, keeping communities separate from each other. And when you're isolated like that, you develop your own unique culture, your own identity. It basically baked those internal divisions right into the landscape.
But geography doesn't have to be natural, like mountains. Sometimes it's just a line on a map. That's exactly what the 38th parallel in Korea is. It started as a totally artificial boundary drawn by outsiders after World War II. But now, it's one of the most intense, heavily armed borders on the planet, and it's sliced a single nation, a single people right down the middle.
And here's another twist. Geography can cause conflict not just by keeping people apart, but by forcing them together over a shared, vital resource. Look at the Middle East. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers are the lifeblood of the region. And who controls that water? Well, that's a huge source of tension between Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. Then you throw in Cold War politics, where Turkey was with NATO and Syria and Iraq were backed by the Soviets, and suddenly access to water becomes a weapon.
Okay, so we've got our three ingredients. Let's put it all together now and see why these specific places are so prone to, well, shattering.
So here it is, the perfect recipe for a geopolitical disaster. Step 1, start with some deep, pre-existing internal divisions. It could be ethnic, religious, whatever. Step 2, add a heaping dose of external rivalry. where big powers are poking and prodding for their own gain. And step 3, mix it all together with some kind of divisive geography that either walls people off or makes them fight over resources.
And that's really the whole point. It's not any one of these things on its own. It's the toxic mix of all three. When you have those internal fractures and external powers are pouring fuel on the fire, and the very land itself is making things worse, that's when you get a Shatterbelt. That's the formula that creates some of the most unstable places on Earth.
So I want to leave you with a question to think about. Now that you know the 3 ingredients, internal division, external pressure, and divisive geography, look at the world map. Where do you see those 3 things coming together right now? Where is the next Shatterbelt starting to form?